This week in the security news, malware-laced printer drivers, Unicode steganography, Rhode Island may sue Deloitte for the data breach. They may even win, at least in my opinion. Japan's active cyber defense law, stop with the ping, LLMs replace Stack Overflow, you don't say. Aggravated identity theft is aggravating. Ivanti DSM and why you shouldn't use it. EDR is still playing cat and mouse with malware. There's a cellular modem in your solar gear. Don't slack on securing Slack, cross-site scripting in your mail, SIM swapping even, and the SEC, Avantian libraries, and supercomputers in space. All that and more on this episode of Paul's Security Weekly. This is a Security Weekly production for security professionals by security professionals. Please visit securityweekly.com/subscribe to subscribe to all the shows on our network. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where exploits run wild, packets aren't the only things getting sniffed, and the cocktails flow steady. It's Paul's Security Weekly. Imagine a world where every threat, ransomware, supply chain attacks, zero-day exploits, is stopped before it can even begin. ThreatLocker makes that world a reality with a zero-trust approach to cybersecurity. By giving you granular control on every executable that can happen in your environment, ThreatLocker protects your business around the clock. No more guessing, no more gaps. Just rock-solid protection that keeps your operations running smoothly and your data secure. Discover how ThreatLocker's least privilege approach can safeguard your organization against known and unknown threats. Take the first step towards total peace of mind. Visit securityweekly.com/ThreatLocker today. Coming to you from the Hacker Syndicate Studios, this is Paul's Security Weekly. It's episode number 875, being recorded on Wednesday, May 21st, 2025. I'm, of course, your host, Paul Asadorian, joined by Mr. Sam Bound. Sam, welcome.
Good evening. Glad to be here.
Yes, good to have you. Mr. Lee Neely is here with us.
Hey, it's good to be here. And now that Muppet-themed pigs in space is running around in my head.
Is that where I got that from? I couldn't exactly remember the reference. That's right. It was the Muppets. Miss Mandy Logan is here with us. Mandy, welcome.
Well, thank you, Matt. Thank you. And this evening, since we haven't done dad jokes and we haven't discussed what we're drinking in a while, so I'm going to say I'm having coconut vodka.
I'm having some kind of beer, whatever beer Larry put in the fridge. And shortly I'm going to smoke some bourbon, maybe some scotch. We'll see how depressing the stories are. Might need both.
Well, I hope we're going right into the malware-infected printer one.
Okay, we can start there. But first, I have announcements. Cyber threats move fast. Are your credentials already out there? Join Channel E2E and Flare for Tales from the Dark Web, a live webcast revealing how info-stealer malware and account takeovers happen and how to stop them. See real-time demos, learn proactive defense strategies, and discover how Flare's identity intelligence can keep your data safe. June 12th at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. Register at securityweekly.com/dark web. It's also where we keep our dark web. We have our own dark web. It's right there. Don't forget about Identiverse. It's returning to Las Vegas June 3rd through the 6th. You can hear from 250 plus expert speakers, connect with 3,000 plus identity security professionals across 4 days of keynotes, breakout sessions, and deep dives into the latest identity security trends. Also take part in hands-on workshops and explore the brand new non-human identity pavilion. I've said this so many times, I feel like it's not new, but it is new to the conference. You can register and save 25% with the code IDV25-securityweekly at securityweekly.com/IDV2025. Don't forget to check out Mandy, Jeff, and myself at RVASec. The Linux desktop for security professionals being delivered on Wednesday. Is that the 4th? I think that's the 4th, June 4th. I will be delivering that, of course. Talk about why you should run Linux on your desktop as opposed to Windows 10 because it's becoming end of life. Yeah. So there.
Hey, Mandy, did you know that an opinion without 3.14 is just an onion?
Oh my God.
Thank you.
We needed a dose of dad joke humor.
But I also thank you.
I'm
All
here to
right.
help.
Malware. See, I thought this was going to be malware on printers,
But it's not.
but it's not. It's malware
And-
in printer drivers.
Okay,
Yeah.
but first, it's also a $6,000 printer. That isn't going to affect a lot of people, but
I kind of want. It's a UV.
You want a
I didn't
UV?
know they made. I didn't know they made UV printers. I didn't know that was a thing. And
Well,
this is
they're
for
also-
printing like pictures, documents.
This is for printing on fabric too. So for
I
So
just-
wood,
okay.
acrylic,
get a
tile,
shirt
and
with a
plastic.
thing on it.
Yeah, I just looked it
Oh,
up.
okay.
Apparently, it uses UV to dry the ink.
Nice.
Okay.
This, I guess, replaced silk screening.
I guess.
Yeah, I've heard there was like laser printers for T-shirt printing,
Mhm.
but this is different. This is UV. Is that the same thing that they were talking about? When they said laser.
Normal
I'm
laser
thinking
printers don't have
close enough
UV.
for
This
mother
is a new
government
feature.
work, Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, so
I didn't research
pro-colored.
all the different types of printing. There's all kinds of newfangled devices that basically let you print on anything.
Have you
they all
seen the
use
printing with wood?
different- Yeah. They burn. They do the laser etching. That's
No, the 3D
actual-
printing that uses wood filament.
Oh no! I
No
have not.
way.
Yeah.
I have wood colored filament, but
It
not.
glues it
No.
on with epoxy or something.
No, so it extrudes. It's actual wood, and whenever so I watched a craftswoman who made, I don't know why she did this, but she whittled a crock out of wood. All right, then she 3D
Yeah.
printed a crock out of wood.
That's
I mean, the
crazy.
shoe.
Yeah.
So it's like a
And-
basket.
Why would she do that? But-
Yeah, exactly. But I'm going to say there's a lot of the content that you guys consume. I'm like, why would they do that? So like she
Yeah, it's
had
true.
it.
Yeah,
Well,
and-
they
very
write
true.
themselves.
Yes.
Because it's there, right?
Yeah.
But
That's
it
as I can.
actually, so it was her first time printing with the wood filament, and she said, and you could, it showed, it looked like wood grain. It smelled like wood.
Sounds
It was
kind of
good.
cool.
It was
And you
very
use
cool.
now we're not way off topic actually, but slightly off. But did you use a regular 3D printer for that, or do you need a special?
No, I think it was a regular one. I don't remember the model it was.
Probably a
it was
special
it was one that
nozzle?
I'd heard of though. It wasn't like some crazy
Yeah,
specialist.
But
So
you
I would-
need some
I would
kind of glue,
imagine-
right?
well, I would imagine you need a special nozzle with a certain
Yeah.
diameter in a very specific temperature. I can't imagine being at 220 degrees Celsius and printing wood because it would burn.
And you
I don't
need
know.
some kind of glue, right, to hold the layers together.
Well,
I would
I'm
im-
thinking,
yeah.
I didn't look into the filament, but it looked to me like as it was printing and then as it was finished, because the way that I always say extrude, but is that the right word?
Yeah,
Like
it's
for-
extrude. Yeah,
okay.
yeah. Yep.
So whenever you looked at the actual wood grain in the crock that she printed, it looked very even and actually kind of looked better than the one she had whittled.
That's crazy.
And so I'm thinking that the filament itself must have some intense polymers or bonding agent, right? And then as
Let's put something in.
yeah, so it's already in there because my guess, I did not research this yet, but my guess is that it's tiny wood slivers.
It's, I found a thing that says it's a mixture of PLA and wood elements that make realistic wood-like parts. So,
Yeah.
I mean, it's a thing. Holy cow, this is really
It's-
neat.
It's really cool. Like it gives me the same feeling as back in like 2010, 2011, whenever I first saw them 3D printing the aircraft parts.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Like that's pretty cool.
it's pretty amazing.
It is.
So, but UV printers are
That's all.
amazing as well, and so is the malware that you get with the drivers, which is kind of interesting. Like,
From their site, yeah.
yeah, you get it not just on the USB drive that comes with the printer, but also from their site. Like, had it been one or the other, it might have different theories.
So
but the fact that it was in both means, it could mean a lot of things, right? Whoever's responsible for distributing that software, well, they could have gotten owned in the
Supply
SDLC,
chain.
in the
Yeah,
supply
supply
chain
chain. They-
for that. Yeah. And then it was just the company that was like, oh, put the software on a USB drive and put it on our website, and it got pwned before.
Well,
that
that's what they
process.
said. That was what their statement said. The software
right. It
hosted on
was-
our website was initially transferred via USB drives.
Although
It is
they were-
possible that a virus was introduced during this process.
Right. But it wasn't their, whatever it is, procolor.com website or whatever. It was the third party that they were using to host their firmware. But it doesn't matter. They put it on there using their firmware, and that
Right.
brought along a little present.
And not great malware either. I mean, Microsoft Defender found it. So,
Yeah.
I
Well,
mean, there's that.
And it used Floxif.
Floxif virus, the Floxif virus.
Right. And it also
Yes.
used, what is it, that snipvex that hides in binaries, rewriting binaries. So if you've got that particular one, you've got to like, pretty much you're going to wind up doing a reimage.
Yeah, well, yeah, it didn't look like very advanced malware. One was a backdoor rat, and one was a cryptocurrency stealer.
Yeah, but no, not but. I agree with you, and I'm thinking that the market that these printers are, like if it's the folks like at the trade show printing shirts or something in a booth, they're gonna be go to the freezer, get the box, not IT professionals that could really deal with it. I mean, it's just as tragic no matter what the sophistication of the malware. I guess it's gonna suck for them,
Right?
Because these are people just trying to share their craft. I mean, come on, printing on shirts, garments, film, whatever the hell. It's that part kind of blows.
It talks about there's a cheaper printer, and this one's expensive. It's like $6,000 for the UV printer.
I wouldn't be surprised if they had multiple.
It says you can put any kind of ink you want in it, which is interesting.
Probably means it doesn't have to be their ink either.
Right. But I mean, they're monetizing on the back end with cryptocurrency stealing malware, so they don't need to charge for cartridges. I think that there's just a trade-off.
Cartridges should be free.
Right.
Just run this little application on your machine that's using the printer, please. But
I don't.
Oh, is that why?
But I don't believe that this was put there by the company. I think they got owned in the supply chain.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they
for
originally
sure.
denied it, and then they said, "Oops, yeah." And then they removed it from the stuff online. If it was on the USBs that were shipped, there's really not much they can do about that.
Right. Yeah. Wipe those USBs or throw them out.
Their
They don't
incident
give you, like, the
response
greatest-
they seem
Go ahead,
pretty
Ted.
rudimentary in the incident response. They seem not to have much of a security program.
Well, and that's how they got malware in the supply chain.
Yeah.
Which, but do they not install their own software on Windows, or they have Microsoft Defender? Like, I would think that someone in the QA department was like, "Hey, this software is shipping. We
The
should
what
install
department?
it on something and test it, and it would be a Windows computer with Defender enabled." Maybe
What
they
is
didn't do
this
that.
QA thing you talk about? What's that?
Right.
That's a bug, not a feature. Wait a minute.
It was a developer, and then developers don't run any EDR or have Defender enabled. Maybe.
I scanned the code with ChatGPT. It was fine. No, I don't.
Yeah. How do you
I
miss
think-
that?
I'm thinking, I was just trying to think of like the impact. So those printers in general, it would be used by small businesses, like people printing stuff for Etsy. Right. I don't feel like
So
there would be a lot more of them
basically,
deployed in
it's just
small
looking-
situations.
It's. I think they're going after just nodes that might be available and susceptible to putting their, cryptocurrency dealer on, and they were smart. They'd set it to operate like from midnight to 4 or 5 in the morning. It'd never be noticed. When the shop's not running after hours workload or open for business. But hey.
So wherever Lee gets his "I'm retired" T-shirts printed at, you think they have a lot of cryptocurrency on it?
Apparently they do. I hadn't thought to ask them that. Yeah.
I'm fascinated with the printer. I mean, I do want to talk about the malware, but I'm just fascinated with the printer.
Oh man, some
Yeah.
of my favorite like conference talks are the ones on fax machines and printers getting pwned.
Yeah.
Like literally,
Right.
like I still go back to DC 26 with What the Fax, and that was like one of the best talks I've ever been to.
Yeah, I really thought it was going to be a printer hack, but
It's not.
it's really not. I do link to the original, which is interesting. The original article is touted as a printer review, the Pro Colored V11 Pro DTO UV printer review. But the review very much talks about how there was malware in the drivers of the software. I said drivers, but Sounds more like the software.
I thought it was
Maybe
software.
It's
Well-
the software and the drivers bundled into one.
You know they're going to cross the streams with that one.
Yeah, the printer's software is crawling with viruses, but the hardware is respectable, built sturdily, and produces great print quality. So, it's interesting. Readily available heads that are easy to access. Yeah, recommended small business. Just, stay away from the malware.
Wait, it says he was able to find versions of the necessary software that didn't include the reported viruses.
Yeah.
I wonder what the differences were and where they got them. Different version, maybe?
Right. Didn't say a different source, did it? No.
Yeah, this
I
guy is
would've-
talking about what I thought I'd read with the other article, because that was also one of my stories that, originally they denied it. They said, no, we didn't have a problem. But although and in fact, I think they were telling him just click the do it anyway. And he's like, no, and he had to get like a buddy that was associated with a different group that apparently carried more weight with the pro-colored folks to get him to listen.
Oh, interesting.
Um,
I'm not sure what the deal is with the denial, right?
Well, I could see it when somebody tells you your baby's ugly, your
Mhm.
product's software has got a problem. Your first reaction will be deny it historically, but in
Right.
the day of vulnerability disclosure programs, you probably want to say, "Let me get back to you," but they may not have gotten the memo.
I mean, it oddly reminds me of the CrowdStrike incident where I talked about QA.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, wait, you mean nobody put this update on a running Windows PC to see what would happen and reboot it? And this is the same thing. Like, no one put this software on a PC and tested it before it went out. Like, this is basic QA stuff. Have we lost sight of QA?
Mm-hmm.
Has QA gotten
feel
too
like-
fancy? Like QA, like
don't
there
think
are
it's too
basic functions of QA. Like, let's do exactly what the user is going to do to set this printer up and make sure it works before we ship it. That's my understanding of QA. Of course, knowing what the user is going to do is a source of so many fantastic memes about what the developers intend. Like, oh, no user would think of using it this way, and then they do. Which is why we have warning labels like,
Yeah.
don't plug this toaster in and put it in the bathtub.
Oh, that's what DTF printing. Oh, direct to fabric, yeah, for stickers as well.
It is a good looking printer. I
And
agree
it looks
with
like it does an
Cameron
outstanding
Coward.
job.
The printer's
It does.
massive,
Did you look
too.
at that?
Yeah.
On each of the materials, it's actually really nice.
I mean, the guy said,
Yeah, it
"Hey,
does-
my wife even improved some of these prints that we could hang up on the walls." So hey,
I mean, yeah, just get rid of the malware. We want to buy this printer now.
yeah, no, it's
we're all gonna
it looks
pitch in,
really
but-
cool.
we are going to have custom printed everything. Like
Everything.
everything. It's going to be off grid and just custom printed everything, even our
Mhm.
wood clogs.
Is that what you're rocking to the next conference? Wood clogs.
Yeah, exactly.
Then you're gonna put the wood clogs through the UV printer and put stuff on them,
Well, yeah,
or
well,
print the little croc charms.
she's just going
for
to 3D print the labels on her water bottle. She's not going to have to put stickers on it at all.
I know.
Nope.
It's kind of neat.
Next, then I'll start making like sleeves. You could put sleeves in there and print on them. And I can walk up to random con goers and just shove a sleeve on their arm, walk away.
Or around their necks.
It depends on
Depends
their
on the
behavior.
con goer, doesn't it?
Mhm.
Yeah. Or as I'm escorting them out, there should be some kind of like, when we're escorting people out of DEF CON, there should be some kind of cruel parting gift.
The GPS ankle tag isn't working for him.
I wonder though, like, was this the first user that ran that software and saw the alert and did something about it? Like, were there other users that bought this printer, installed the software, and either didn't have any antivirus software or just clicked through and was like, yeah, whatever. I don't care
I'm
if it has
sure
a
they
virus.
clicked through. Are you kidding?
They
I
might
think
have
the
clicked,
only
right?
reason this was found was because Cameron Coward
Yeah.
is a specific, works for Axter.
Right. Cameron was like, no. Something's not right. here.
Right.
This software should not have viruses. But you tell me everyone, I don't know how big the market is for these, but
I don't know. I wonder how many have been sold.
Do they notify customers too? Like, having said that, like, were
Uh,
customers notified? I think.
I hadn't seen any reference to it. I'm going to say it. I assume they did, but I had to say the A word. It'd be
Yeah, like-
nice if they did. That would be the 2025 thing to do. You know.
So there's another article linked.
Oh,
from
you
the
don't have
other
to connect it to the
article now.
internet either. Sorry.
Yeah.
No, it's okay. Oh, so this is like the in-depth. There's an in-depth analysis from a malware researcher from G Data Cyber Defense.
They're the ones
Karsten.
that got the attention of.
Oh, okay. That's what you were saying before. Yeah.
Yeah. You had to say the word for me to pull it out of deep
Yeah.
storage. But yeah.
They didn't want to listen to poor Cameron. Is that his name,
Mhm.
Cameron?
Mhm.
Yeah. So they listened
But
to this
they
guy.
listened to a company.
Yeah.
He's a principal malware researcher.
Oh wait, how are
Craziness.
hackers weaponizing Slack? What's that?
Oh, we can transition to that. That's a pretty good one, actually.
Yeah.
So they're basically just stealing all the things inside Slack, right? This is a problem. Where is that story? I didn't have that many stories. I still can't find it.
It's number 5.
Yeah,
You're
it's
number
pretty
5.
high.
Oh, yeah.
Um,
So they gain access to a user device, so they're on the system. They harvest identity tokens from memory to bypass MFA. So Slack stores your authentication credentials in memory. And so they rip it out from memory. Then they use those credentials to move laterally through the network. Then they put rats on everything, which gains them access. Then with higher level credentials, attackers extract Slack authentication tokens from memory, but they did that already. They gain more access. But then they download, like in the case of Disney, they
Mhm.
downloaded like a terabyte worth of logs from
Right.
Slack, because Slack keeps that history, and you can
Oh.
tune that history for as much or a little as you want. Once you get the right credentials, they're just taking everything from Slack
Right.
and then going through it.
So
So if you think about what's in Slack, because all of us get lazy at some point, and you paste something in there you're not supposed to or whatever,
Yeah.
the attackers now have it.
because that Disney one was where they harvested his Slack credentials off his personal computer and then was able to get in. And I'm thinking, shame on Disney for not doing Slack with MFA, because it
Well,
supports it.
but even if you replay them from memory, is it still require MFA? I think you might be right.
Mhm.
I can't just log into Slack.
Well, no, not well. If you have a cache session, I think, but unless it's timed out. But if you're
Every
trying
time
to
I
do an
turn on-
initial login, no.
But when I turn on my Slack, I don't have to log in. It just comes right up. There must be
Right,
a
yes,
cached
but-
cookie or
With
something.
the cache cookies
Right,
and stuff.
right.
But when I had Slack with MFA, yeah, it would start up again. But if I wanted to start up a new session that's, like from another machine, I had to MFA all over again.
Which means they need anti-CSRF on that cookie, so it can't be run from another machine,
Mhm.
which
Correct.
maybe they lack.
Mhm.
That's a good extra step. So
Yeah, because I don't think just MFA protects you in
you've-
this case.
it's
A new login it would, but a cache
Right.
credential being
the
reused,
the
it's not going.
anti-CSRF plus MFA plus but yeah. But I know a lot of Slack channels that are just like username, password all day long, or even, you can even do give me your email address. I'll give you a link that's magic that will open and log you into the Slack channel.
Mhm.
You can turn that off with the MFA. You can require the MFA in there. And so I'm
Right.
thinking for a corporate with sensitive stuff, hello.
Yeah, you got to require the MFA.
Yeah.
This is interesting. It says that among dozens of EDR vendors, the failure rate for detecting the rat is around 20%, with one vendor failing to detect 90% of the time.
Ooh, let's standardize on that. Let's not name names. But that's not.
Yeah, it talks about process hollowing as an evasion technique, which is executing arbitrary code in the address space of separate live processes. You're basically just copying code into the address space of another running process, which would inherit all of its attributes and privileges of that process.
So, aside from our talk about strengthening up the login process, do they have a? Oh, I was going to say, do they have do they have anything else we can do? And it's like, oh yeah, go buy their product. No,
well, there's that, but
I mean, of course, that's fair. That's fair. I just would like to see that you could do these things, or you could buy our product for you. You know.
Wait, so if
I'd
I
be
just
curious
said,
now if you have MFA enabled in Slack, if you can reuse sessions and what else you could do to stop that.
Since I retired, I can't go research that as easily.
Well, you ought to look at your story number 8, which is just another old trick that still works. I did that like 10 years ago.
Yeah.
You just stick your shellcode, your malware in the memory of a Python module and run it. And apparently they're still not onto that. That was an old technique when I did it.
I was going to say, this technique is not new, but it's still
in Hacking
works.
Exposed, 4th edition from like 12 years ago.
I remember like the Black Hills folks talking about very similar things. Like if it's not, I'm embedding like a binary inside of a Python script, it was, I'm embedding .NET code inside of, TypeScript inside of this other thing. Like you're just embedding languages in each other. And it seems EDR still has issues with that. There was a great explanation of exactly what they did. I think it was my new Perplexity summarize thing that did it. Let's see if it does it again. Increasingly difficult C-based loaders common methodology. Used MSF Venom to create interpreter shellcode in Python format. Translated a simple C shellcode loader into Python using the C-types library to interact with Windows APIs. The loader allocates memory, writes the shellcode, and executes it in the current process inside of a Python script.
That's exactly the technique from a textbook more than 10 years ago.
Yeah. But the thing about this that struck me about this article was it still works.
Yeah. No, that's
it just
actually, we used to talk about that more than we do these days. There was a lot of the old ways still work stories out there.
But when he did this example, he uploaded it to VirusTotal and 0% detected it. Is that?
But that's not really fair, because that's what, when I did that, and Norton people contacted me and said a local installation does heuristic tests that VirusTotal doesn't know about.
Yeah,
so you really should try it against a local installation.
I don't think VirusTotal, the online one, digs in as deep as...
That's right. Yeah. Well, it looks for known indicators of compromise in the static file. And of course, a new file won't be detected, even if it's using a technique. The heuristics might have caught it if you'd actually run it on a real machine.
Right. If you'd actually executed this on a real machine.
Yeah.
I'm curious to see what your success rate would be.
That's what happened with me, actually. The one I did like 8 years ago, the local machine caught it. And then I had to introduce more things like a delay.
How did the local machine catch it? Through EDR?
It notices the behavior.
Yeah.
Behavior-based.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. As opposed to
there's a lot of like generic things that, false positives are a thing, false negatives are a thing. But there's a lot of things generically that we can test for that just don't normally occur. And sometimes they work great and sometimes not, but this particular technique. So he did run it with with 8 different tools.
Oh, and they didn't catch it?
So detection results are embedded. So I packed the Python loader, blah, blah, blah. I used a mix of free antivirus products and one EDR, and 1 out of 8 tools stopped the loader from running. Bitdefender was the only one that blocked it completely. The others either missed it entirely or only blocked the executable. Interesting.
Yeah.
So even he was still able to bypass with like a 10-year-old technique. No, is it that? It's not that old, is it? It might. No, it might be.
It may be that the Metasploit shell. See, the thing I wondered is it intrinsically malicious? Is it doing something that other things wouldn't? I mean, because I remember when I published this thing that did this years ago, the antivirus vendor said, well, I could detect that, but we're not going to bother, because they write the rules to catch real malware. And
Right.
other tools that do things like make a remote connection, that might be something like TeamViewer, right? That might be a perfectly legitimate tool. You don't want to block anybody that offers remote control.
And that's why attackers use RMM tools.
Yeah. Yeah. But the point is, if you were just to block everything with that behavior, you'd block a bunch of legitimate stuff. So in a way, it's not really that surprising. The only thing that's surprising is he made it with MSF Venom. And you would think that that would make it automatically malicious, but maybe not. Maybe it just creates a listening shell the way anything else would, and there's no way to immediately detect it.
And Venom just generates shellcode in different formats, right? It does the polymorphism, or it does some more different stuff than that, but its foundational roots are was it Rainforest Puppy, whoever came up with the polymorphic? There were some early people, right? They came up with polymorphic shellcode way back in the day.
And I think it's still using something like Apache Bench, some really old thing.
You're right. Yeah. Crazy. It still works, though. I mean, what I was getting to in this article is this is why attackers don't have to use these super advanced techniques or dump into things like firmware or even drivers or bootloaders or UEFI, because this stuff still works. So I can get on the system, I can get around the EDR, like I can escalate privileges, go on the second.
And you can increasingly just do living off the land. Don't use malware at all. Use a perfectly legitimate signed tool.
Now, we're making it sound easy. So if you were to go stand up next to an enterprise that's watching, that might be a different story. I think that's where like separates the great pen testers from the rest, are the ones that can do this consistently without a whole ton of research or work. Like they've honed their craft so that they can do this on a consistent basis, right? That's where I think the great pen testers are living today, is they can do this kind of stuff without batting. And they're constantly keeping their toolkits up to date. Once something gets caught, they're morphing it and going on to the next thing.
So now I'm thinking, Sam, you thought living off the land. Now I'm thinking, okay, this is cool. Now make a version that works on Linux and Mac as well.
Well, so you don't need to do much on Linux other than live off the land, because no one runs EDR.
But I'm just saying, make a cross-platform version. But I realize that the return is different. It's much higher on Windows. I get that.
If you remember when Trusted Sex Carlos Perez came on the show, he talked about them having a toolkit that lets them do just that: cross-platform, maintain persistence, lay low, have stealth, not get called by EDR or other tools. Right, and that's just not a one and done. That is my assessment of that. Is there is a team, not just one person, but a team of people who are constantly working to develop essentially malware that can consistently evade detection, and maintain persistence and stealth.
I mean, it's highly cool and annoying at the same time. It's so cool that they can do this and it works. It's really annoying that they can do this and it works. Right.
I mean, also what could be at play is, and we've talked about this on the show over the years, and I think the cycle just keeps repeating itself. As modern EDRs evolve to detect and prevent the latest threats, they often have memory lapse and or the newer updates invalidate what they were protecting before. So like, I don't know if it's still true today. If anyone's tested, I'd love to know. If you take older malware and older techniques and run them against modern systems, does it not get caught?
I can tell you this is a known problem with AI. They call it catastrophic forgetting. Teaching it something new causes it to forget what it learned previously.
Yeah.
I can remember like 3 things, so don't give me something new. Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly.
Yep.
I'm with you. But
That's a little bit like autistic skills regression. Like ADHD and autism. They'll have.
Does that have the same thing? You learn a new thing, you forget an old thing?
In a way, it's that.
I think that's most people, though, in general.
Most people. Well, this has usually a more pervasive impact because it's more that what they've found through research is that how and when, what motivated the learning. Like say it was attached to some kind of stress or something. Once that stress is gone, the actual thing that was learned is lost, including any other skills that branched off of that.
I get that. See, this
Looks
is
like
why
you
I need,
lost the
this
container.
and this is why I love having an LLM today, because I have ADHD and I forget things, and that makes a
Yes.
lot of sense what you just said. And I had to use an LLM to now rejog my memory. Before it was a lot of Google searching and Stack Overflow and stuff like that, right? Now it's an LLM can just like
Yeah.
what was that? What was that command I read? Because I probably was in an incident response thing. I had to run thing. I was under stress, and then as soon as that was removed, I swear our brains make room for new things by getting rid of the old. I don't think that's.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Oh, no,
maybe
that's
the
exactly
way-
what it is. Because
It's a very high level description of the way it works. There's more science involved, but
right. No, and I know I experience it with even things like after RSAC and learning and being there and adjusting and doing all of that and then coming back and I'm like, huh, how is it that I have absolutely no freaking clue how I was handling my schedule before?
mhm.
Like, how does that just disappear?
Yeah, I remember things for a certain time, and then
Yeah.
I have to ask an LLM.
Well, if you're going to mention Stack Overflow, maybe we should just mention that article.
Well, I mean, and this makes total sense because I noticed it in my own workflow. Used to go to Google and Stack Overflow and find code snippets that did sort of what I needed it to do, and then I would modify that. Now I ask an LLM, and it gives me sort of what I need to do, and then I go modify it. And then I'm like, oh, my workflow has just changed. LLMs likely consumed everything on Stack Overflow anyhow, which explains a lot, because a lot of the code on Stack Overflow was really bad. Not that it was really bad. I mean, some of it's really bad, but I think some of it is just pieces to a larger puzzle. So by themselves, like that would be a great way to solve that problem. But it's, if I have a hammer, every problem's a nail. So if I have this one code snippet that solves that problem, it doesn't necessarily fit perfectly into my code to solve my problems.
Yeah, well, I think this is the great thing about LLM. It's like everybody has a living teacher to talk to. Instead of having to read articles and piece it together, you can get a customized answer that's mostly correct right away.
That explains it,
Oh, it's
because I would love
Yeah.
I would love the
Yeah.
solutions on Stack Overflow where someone, either the author of the answer or someone else, would do like a line by line. You'd find that sometimes where they actually explain the code line by line. And those are the people that know what the heck they're doing. Now an LLM, hallucinations aside, can do the same thing, and you can ask it to explain line by line, even if it's 90% correct.
Yeah.
Still, I'm getting the gist of what that code does. That's great for reverse engineering, but also great if you're like, you generate this code, I don't understand what you generated. Can you explain it to me? Which is great.
Yeah.
I just
think
it saves me a lot of time of doing the mundane stuff. Like conceptually, I know how to code this thing in Python, but save me a bunch of like typing and looking up syntax and stuff like that and give it to me. So I recently generated a script this morning, like really quick. I was like, I just gotta see like how close this can get me in 20 minutes. Because I like literally like 20 or 30 minutes before I had to leave and go pick up my son and take him to his driving lesson, right? And so I'm like, okay. I'm like, if I give you an RSS feed of podcasts, I want you to download each of those audio files, put them in a specific directory, and get the metadata from the RSS file, put that in a text file with the same name, and store those in a directory. And then later I'm like, put error handling in there and make it log all success and failures, put exception handling. Because if you don't say that, it doesn't do it. And when you have a script, like I want to download all 875 episodes of our podcast from the RSS feed, then I want to transcribe that with Whisper. Then I want to build local models. But I'm like, the first step is I need to download all the things. I'm like, well, this is a great job for an LLM. And it actually started downloading everything. It was great. Then pretty quickly, I believe I had 38 gig worth of audio files. And I was like, wait, I need to rerun this and I need to put the storage somewhere else. So I got to go back. I ran out of time. I wanted to go back and reprompt it to say, also, let me define the download directory as a user-defined command line parameter.
Okay.
I'm probably being a little more verbose than I needed to on that, but I like to be very specific in my language with the LLM. Otherwise,
Which
it tries
LLM
to
are you using?
So this was ChatGPT's Python GPT.
Okay.
Which I like. I do want to try Claude with Cursor. My next thing was when I have more time, I want to get Cursor and I want to be able to just iterate on this inside of Cursor.
Wait,
Yeah.
what's the other one? I can't remember the name now. Cursor's competitor.
Codex.
No.
I don't know. Cursor was the one that came to mind.
No, I was just like Friday or Saturday. I was just looking into it. Huh. I'll find it later. Whatever.
Well, related to that is like what Satya Nadella said he does. He doesn't listen to podcasts anymore. He downloads a transcript and uploads it to Copilot, and then he talks to Copilot in the car
Oh, yeah.
to find out what was said on that podcast.
Yeah.
So this may be the modern way of like students who didn't used to not read the book. They would just read Cliff's notes. Now
Mhm.
this could be the modern way to like access podcasts. It
Well,
actually
so
would help.
I started doing this with articles, but
Yeah.
you still have to read the article. But maybe I don't read every article line for line, because some weeks I had 20 stories, and I'm like, I got to pick and choose which ones I read line for line and like really study and research. But the other ones, I'm like, this one's still important enough where I just want the high level from it. And then
Yeah.
the third category is it just like if someone else wants to go read it, it's there. Like the title sounded interesting. Maybe I missed something, but those are like the three major categories. So for that middle category where I just want the high level, Perplexity has a Chrome plugin. So now I can click and it summarizes the article that's in your current browser tab. I'm like, oh, it doesn't work
Yeah.
on every website, which is weird. It has trouble
Yeah.
sometimes parsing the website. So what I do is I copy and paste the URL from the URL bar and I put it in the little widget. The little widget gives me a nice summary. So some of my summaries I have in my stories are from Perplexity. Now, some of them I generate the summary. That was my notes. Then I go read the article, and the summary is just giving me the main points that I can go back.
I would like it if YouTube would index the transcripts of everything in Google, because I have a friend that looks up all
Yeah.
the technical stuff on YouTube, and I never am willing to sit through like a 20-minute video
Yeah.
to find the answer. I want to like do Control F and find the one line of code I need. And I wish I
Right.
could find that inside a video. Where's where they do this one thing I'm trying to do?
You can
Don't you use the summaries, like the YouTube summaries? Because I do that.
Probably, if I knew which video, but I don't even want to bother hunting through the YouTubes. I'd rather have the AI do that and
I think
say,
the AI can pull the transcript from
Yeah.
YouTube and answer questions. I did that recently. I was like, but I
Do you
wanted
have
to
to
ask
ask
it
it too?
specific questions. I'm like, go to this YouTube video, analyze the
Right.
transcript, and then I want to be able to ask it questions.
but you had to find the YouTube video first.
Correct. Yes.
Yeah.
Because Black Hat is publishing some of their videos, and some of them are talks that I really want to watch. And I'm like,
Yeah.
You mean RSAC?
I don't have time. No, Black Hat is
Actual
publishing
oh,
the
from
ones.
last year.
Yeah, they're like a 8-month or whatever delay.
Gotcha.
But I don't have an hour to sit and pay attention and watch a
Yeah.
whole video. But I'm like, is there anything specific in here? Or sometimes I'll summarize that for our research team at Eclipsium. I'm like, this talk is highly related to what we do in research and engineering at Eclipsium. And I'm like, here's the video. And also, I had an LLM summarize it with like high level points for you to see if it's worth because some engineers may be like, that's not exactly what I'm working on. And I can tell that from the AI description. But other ones are
Right.
like, well, based on the description, now I really want to go back and watch the talk.
And is that also with Perplexity?
I use Perplexity for that, yeah.
Okay, because I just started using Grok 3 more in the last few days, and I'm thinking it would probably do really well with that.
And I have a subscription to both Perplexity and ChatGPT.
Okay.
But if there's better, I'm sure there's better ones for specific tasks. But I kind of, because I have a subscription to both of
Yeah,
those, I
you're
try
gonna
and use
use-
them
yeah.
as much as I can. Yeah.
There ought to be a way to subscribe to certain detailed topics and say, let me know when anything is posted about this topic.
Mm-hmm.
See,
I
for
think
that,
Google used to have something like that, but
they used to have a feed. So I use Feedly for that
Right.
today.
Yeah.
In Feedly, you can do AI-based searches. So Feedly does have that. But it'd be
does it
interesting
look
to have
inside videos?
Feedly, does it? I don't know if it looks inside videos. I don't know if it's parsing the transcripts to all YouTube videos.
It should
But
be.
think about how much data that is.
Not much compared to all the other data it's looking through.
Well, not much compared to the video data, I guess. Videos are much bigger than
and all the
text.
text data it's looking through. I mean, this is clearly the thing. It should be built into the engines to just search every possible source of knowledge.
Right. Well, I mean, YouTube is owned by Google, so you'd think they'd be
Yeah.
indexing. Well, they do. They definitely index. 'Cause when you search on Google, it gives you YouTube videos related to your search. So they're
I think
indexing.
just by matching, I think it's just matching the title or
you
the
think
summary.
it's matching titles?
I don't think
Maybe.
it's looking through the transcript yet, although I hope it does, and I bet it will soon.
Well, what's the algorithm for that? But then you're beholden to Google's algorithm. That's the nice part about an external LLM, is it's
Sure.
not beholden to Google's algorithm.
Yeah, well, I used to love Google. It used to really work. Then it went through a period of not working. Now it's starting to work again. I think they've improved things.
Gemini.
There you go.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
and also the whole scenario you're describing really talks about why this. I mean, it comes back to why the drop in Stack Overflow. I don't have an hour to go through Stack Overflow.
Yeah.
And I can go to my LLM, get the thing. Plus, as Paul described it, you got a much better use case, more specific to your thing, and you're done.
I'll go on a limit so you get better code from an LLM than you did from Stack Overflow.
Well, the one thing I
most
know,
of the time.
for like 30 or 40 years, I've been considered a technical guru just because I know how to use a search engine. Like I used to use
Right.
Clippy
Right.
in
That's true.
Microsoft Office, and I would find out all the answer to everybody's questions because they didn't know how to use Clippy.
Yeah.
And the same thing with Google. Most of my students and apparently most of my coworkers don't know how to write a good query, look through the top 10 or 20 hits and find the good stuff because they come to me. And now the AI does that. So they're all all the AI is really doing is giving you what you would have found in the top 5 or 10 hits, but it's doing it more easily.
Yeah. It's true.
And in theory, it's able to look at a larger data set than you can sitting there, even when
Correct.
you're Googling it.
Yeah. So it saves time and I think it creates
Oh,
much
yeah.
better
It used-
results for most users.
Yeah.
It used to take me hours to come up with all the resources. Now on an LLM query, like in Perplexity, it gives you all the links and the resources. And I'm like,
Yeah.
your answer you might have hallucinated, but I can go now read some of these sources that you had, and now you're in the right direction.
And yet, it doesn't replace a human at all, which people keep
No.
finding out. And I was just doing a workshop about this at CACLACICon, and I realized there's a good summary. AIs are stupid and they're crazy because they don't understand
Yeah.
what they're saying and they make up nonsense. So they're a useful employee. They're diligent and they work hard, but they're stupid and crazy. So
Right.
you have to compensate for them. So even if you have
It's
an
a
AI
dangerous
working,
combination.
yeah, it
actually.
doesn't replace the humans on your staff. Your humans need to monitor the AI and clean up the horrible things it does.
Right.
But doesn't that emulate some of the staff anyway?
It does.
Maybe
That's
diligent,
why
but very stupid.
I was horrified when I started teaching college. They stuck me in a room, and it was like a month before anybody came in to see what I was doing. And I said, I could be doing anything to these kids. They wouldn't even know. And in industry, that was never true. Everything I produced was reviewed by my manager. And I was surprised that wasn't true in the education sector.
Oh, did Jeff
No
remove
peer
his
review, huh?
Jeff removed his stories because
That's
he's
weird.
not here.
Oh,
Well, did he remove his stories, or did he get removed entirely from the show notes?
Someone removed him from
Yeah,
the
he's gone.
segment, and he had stories in there. But
Right.
then
when that
that
happens, they go
means
away.
He probably removed himself.
he's banished. His picture is turned to the wall.
Because he had a story about Rhode Island thinking about suing Deloitte,
Yeah.
and
I caught that.
I really wanted to cover that
Yeah,
story because I did a little bit of reading on it. I bet you I can find it. Hold on, I can't.
Which
I can
one?
find
Like
it.
on
I have ways.
Gov Info Security?
Yeah. The Public's Radio. Rather than considering legal action against Deloitte after cyber breach. It's pretty much the first part of the article says that. But then there was a news conference detailed the findings of a review by cybersecurity firm CrowdStrike. That's the link you want to click in Jeff's story that won't be published with this with this episode. I might, if someone reminds me, I'll fix that later. But there was a PDF report published by CrowdStrike that details all of their findings about the breach. And essentially the way it reads is attackers somehow got credentials, Deloitte credentials, VPN credentials, that then allowed them to access the state of Rhode Island's sites and then pivoted within there. But the initial infection vector was someone had valid VPN credentials for Deloitte. And the CrowdStrike report says they don't know the origin. Essentially, they don't know where attackers got those credentials. So they were either so we can theorize now, right? They were either password spraying, or they bought them, or they bought some kind of leak, or whatever,
Right.
or had some other kind of leak. They got those credentials, and that was the initial infection vector. And they persisted for 6 months and pivoted in and basically stole all the data. And so I think Rhode Island has a decent case. I mean, I'm not a lawyer, but your provider for this site basically was this, had the breach and caused you damages. So I think they can show damages, right? I think it cost the state a lot of money to deal with this breach. There was like hundreds of thousands of records. We covered the whole thing. And there was a lot of damages. I mean, they had to pay CrowdStrike to do the remediation. So I think Rhode Island can show damages, and I think Deloitte shows negligence in not just allowing these credentials to be stolen, allowing them to be used and go undetected for months, that resulted in this data breach.
Yeah, that sounds really bad.
But again, I'm not a lawyer. Obviously, lawyers and courts and judges will if it comes to litigation. But
was Deloitte doing instant response?
I believe Deloitte did the initial incident response.
Right. You
and
just
then
think
the
if you're
state hired CrowdStrike.
Yeah, but you just think if you are an incident response company, the customers would expect you to be monitoring your own systems and noticing abuse.
Right.
That would seem to be a reasonable expectation.
Yep.
I uploaded the article in the show notes.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome. Well,
Yeah.
I
So
uploaded the report, not the article.
644,000 plus people were affected through the breach. Over 100,000 names recently uncovered through the CrowdStrike analysis. Yeah, I mean this was bad. Almost as bad as the Rhode Island bridges in general, but that's another story.
Was it true that the Mexican Navy crashed into the bridge?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Is that
By
Yeah.
weekend,
and that
right?
was that New York? That
Yeah, it was New York.
That was
It
a Brooklyn Bridge.
Yeah.
They broke all.
I saw
three of
like
the
an
I
masts.
saw
Instagram
it.
spoof. I saw an
Exactly.
Instagram like spoof video. Did you send that video?
No,
Mandy?
not the
No, no.
spoof.
No.
No, I watched the real thing.
There was
Yeah.
oh okay, but someone sent the spoof, and it was like someone pretending to be a New York City Port Authority, maybe
Hmm.
you work for the Port Authority, or whatever, and talking about how someone ran into the bridge.
That was there was a pilot on board, but there was I guess a power failure on the vessel, and they weren't able to redirect it away from the bridge. There was a tugboat nearby, but it was too far away to do anything about it.
Yeah, by the time
Um,
you get there.
And the sad part is not only the damage to the ship, but a couple of the Mexican officers died.
They
who were
died,
crew,
yeah.
which
Oh,
from their
yeah, I didn't know
industries,
that.
and they
I mean,
were
it was
doing
intense because it hit the masts, and then there were
they were
it was
out,
Navy, right? So
right. They
there
were
were
actually out on the arms as part of a traditional salute, something they do. They were there just that the boat failed to go what it was supposed to be, and it went north instead of south, and just the current got it.
Well,
That's
yeah,
a lot of
if you
mass.
lose engines on the boat, it's gonna go wherever the wind and the current takes you.
Right, and the sails were furled, so there was
Yeah.
not much anybody could do unless, like I said,
Boat
unless
just
they'd had an
goes,
active
man.
tug in there, then maybe. But that thing was huge.
I thought
don't
I
know how
heard
many
they kept being
tons.
I
told
can't
they would
imagine,
fit.
driving small. Like I drive like 23 and 24 foot boats, and the marine. One of the marinas I pull out of, like it's for me, it's tight. Like I'm sure
Mhm.
people that have a lot more boating experience than I do are like, "Oh, nothing," but like it's tight. And there's like $1 million boats on either side, and if the
Yeah.
wind's blowing, like you really got to pay attention to where your throttle is, so you don't hit anything. And so you lose an engine, and that's how. Yep, obviously that's how. Stuff
Now,
happens.
but then add to that, my experience with sailboats is that sailboats, they're intended to run off the sails. So
Right.
the stinky engine isn't that big. It's small,
Right,
because
yeah.
it's only for maneuvering. It's not for
For the full
primary
stop.
power. I mean,
Yep.
that iron jib is only good for this much. It's designed to, the primary
Mhm.
power source is wind. And so even if it was going, it's not clear that could, it's depending on how far it went. Yeah. So it's really sad. And it was a beautiful ship that got damaged. It was built in like 1982 or something like that.
Mhm.
So it wasn't that old, but it was still gorgeous. So, and it was one of those goodwill mission things. They were almost done. Their next stop was Iceland. So, I feel for those guys. That had to suck. I mean,
For sure. I had Japan's active cyber defense
Yes.
law.
That
Well,
one. That
that's
was
an
the main
interesting
story
one.
I was going to upload. Go ahead.
Let's get to hacking back.
yeah. So, I mean, that's one. It's supposed to actually be in effect in 27. The interesting thing is that they've got to get they're trying to create some oversight organizations first that moderate the response so that you're not going crazy, as well as making sure they're not monitoring internal or emails or other things that they
Mhm.
shouldn't be looking at. That one but having governance in an attack back model is important to make sure the scope is right. My biggest question is they going to be able to deal with all the entry and exit points into Japan?
Right.
Is it,
I can't believe they didn't have this capability before.
Yeah, this is what
Or
our
maybe-
NSA and TIO have, right? We've had it
Yeah.
for years.
well,
Correct.
but then, they take care of Japan, but what about that big connect point in Switzerland? So it's interesting. There's also a fine. There's a fine of up to 2 million yen or 4 years in prison if you illegally use data. In other words, that's for the Japanese that are involved with it not coloring within the line and using the data appropriately. You can go to jail. That's important to have
Mhm.
a penalty phase in there. I mean, I've seen security researchers with access to huge data sets about stuff, and then they do their own research just to find out, oh, I decided to run a background check on you because I got all this data. It's like, but that's not what you're authorized to do.
Yeah, there's been
So-
court cases where people have gone to prison because of that.
Yeah.
Oh,
so
yeah.
I'm like,
The police officer, right? That was
Yeah.
accessing records. Yep.
And hospital staff, I've seen that where they look up a celebrity's medical records.
yeah,
Oh,
that's
all-
not cool.
all
You
the
need
time.
those guardrails and consequences. I mean, we could argue about whether they're sufficient or not, but the fact that they're starting out with those intended to be in place is huge.
Yeah.
But the governance piece is important.
Yeah.
When you think about it in the context of a hospital, when it goes to like one extreme or the other, right?
Yeah.
It's bad.
Yeah.
So if we'll use the hospital as an example, everyone in the hospital can access anyone's patient record at any given time for any length of time.
Mhm.
That's obviously there's a lot of privacy violations there. But if no one can access the data, or
Yeah.
it's so tightly locked down where it affects patient care, because I'm like, hold on, if I'm in the hospital, I want like everyone who has the slightest bit of expertise into what might be wrong with me to analyze my data and not get hung with, oh, I can't access Paul's record because of
Yeah.
privacy laws or whatever. That's bad. So like my
Oh.
wife works at like a teaching hospital, and they had this exact scenario, and it was like, where is the line? And I'm like, I want everyone to learn. If there's a weird case, I want everyone learning about that. So if
Mhm.
someone comes in with that case or something similar, people have looked at that record, even they weren't involved directly with that patient's care, they can use it as and there's ways to anonymize the data, right?
Yeah.
It gets hard if it's like the weirdest medical condition. It gets hard to anonymize it, right? Because if only one person in the world one person in this
and
region has ever had that.
I'm kind of that one person. Like, because them doing that, the teaching hospital, is part of how I got the rest of my
Mhm.
funds, like my bill, wiped
Right.
out because it was a teaching hospital, and
Teaching,
because they
yeah.
use it as a teaching case all of the time. So yeah, and like it was so uncommon that
Right.
At the same time, if you think about it too, it's like, you're in the hospital, somebody's coding out. They need to know that you're deathly allergic to the thing they're trying to give you to recover you.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Correct. So there's need to know is there. So yeah, it's slippery. But once again, they probably put some guardrails in there that says, look, this is what the access is for, not for these other things, and that if we catch you screwing around, it's effectively career fatal. So Yeah. But also, back to Japan a little bit, it looks like they're also trying to engage the public to get them understanding. So, I mean, you definitely want the public on board with, government shutting down, malfeasance
It seems to be related a lot to monitoring and not so much for offensive cyber operations, though. It's interesting.
Yeah,
A lot of the
but do you think we're
governance,
getting
right, was
all the
about-
information?
Yeah, it was
But
data
it is about
access.
the response. I mean, the response is there too, but there is if it's going sideways and you need to pull the plug, there should be something. But it's so new, it could be they haven't gotten there yet. They'll have a playbook that they can act on real time. But it's interesting. There's something to keep an eye on because it could be really cool.
Oh, I didn't. Sam said that.
So next time Gojira attacks Tokyo, Cyber Godzilla's in trouble.
Cyber Godzilla's in trouble.
Unless he communicates by text. As long as he does text, it
Yeah.
won't be monitored.
They can't monitor.
Yeah, text is think about it. That's another, email and text, those are two slippery slopes. But that's okay. They'll have to never mind. Yeah. You got to start somewhere.
Well,
And it's cool.
I was pretty interested to finally learn how the Signal hack happened.
I
I
saw
mean,
that.
that's-
I didn't get a chance to read your
Yeah,
article, but yeah.
Remember, we talked about it a couple weeks ago when it happened,
Yeah.
and we said
Mhm.
the guy said he got in 20 minutes, so it must have been something trivial like an open Amazon bucket. And what it was unprotected API. They had an API endpoint called heap dump that had a dump of the heap memory, and it was unprotected. So you could just
What?
download blocks of heap memory, just like the SSL Heartbleed. You could just get blocks of memory. And of course, in that memory is the recent requests and
Right.
responses, including credentials, including chat logs and everything, which explains why, they found a bunch of random stuff. They didn't have all
Yeah,
the stuff
yeah.
from Pete. They had some random stuff. And then somebody went and dumped a ton of it and put it on DDoS secrets, which is like WikiLeaks. So there's a ton of those logs available now to, they say, legitimate researchers. And
Request access
Reuters.
here.
And Reuters has already published a summary of what they found there. And no great smoking guns, but a lot of random chat logs and credentials from a bunch of different companies. So whoever set that thing up was appallingly insecure.
Yeah.
So it's
Well,
appropriate
not just
that
set
they
it up,
turned it
but
off.
whoever coded it too, like the APIs, every week we could talk about unprotected APIs.
I know. I think unprotected APIs are way up there as a top risk, just like before that was Amazon buckets, and before that it was SQL injection.
Yeah.
Just
I mean,
wide open
unprotected
doors.
There's a whole sub-industry meant to protect APIs.
Yeah.
Yes, there is. And it's a good thing that it's there, but doggone it.
There's always something
So he
people
says-
do. Used to be default passwords, there's always a dumb mistake to make.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I can't tell if he's being cheeky, but he says it was either running an 8-year-old version of Spring Boot or someone had manually configured it to expose the heap dump endpoint.
I would go with the latter.
Yeah.
I mean, they might have been
old code.
They might have been running an old Spring Boot is like the Java framework, right?
Right. Yeah.
Mhm.
It's
Java
an open
Spring
source.
is Spring.
right.
Yeah.
Remember that happened to a major company about a month ago. They had an 8 or 10-year-old unpatched system running.
Oh, that was that 4chan?
No, it was somebody like CrowdStrike or somebody, some major
Oh.
company. And they had an unprotected box. We talked about it on the podcast.
Mm.
They got hacked through a box that had been like 10 years behind
Oh,
on
yeah,
security
yeah.
updates.
Yes. It was Oracle. That was Oracle.
Oracle, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, that was Oracle.
Yeah.
Well,
That's
speaking
the
of
thing.
heinous vulnerabilities, we got to talk about Ivanti.
Well,
Okay.
yeah, they seem to be a frequent offender.
And I don't want to be vendor bashing, right?
No.
Avanti's in this predicament, I believe, that is somewhat unique. It's interesting how much enterprise adoption they've gained, likely because their products come from multiple acquisitions. And so you get that kind of stickiness, right? If you have acquired software from one company, you don't want to let that go and they get acquired. Well, it still works and they get acquired again and again. They're like, oh, well, we'll just stick with it because it's too much trouble to move off of it. But now Ivanti, and if you've done any kind of development or programming, you know that inheriting someone else's code can be a complete nightmare. To add new features to that and maintain it is a complete nightmare. And Ivanti, I believe, has products that multiple products that have come from multiple acquisitions.
Yes, they do.
One of the articles I read, it might have been my story number one, which was Watchtower Labs did this write up. When we know about their write ups, how amazing they are.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But in this one, you won't be disappointed, right? If you like the Watchtower Labs write up, and I thought this one might have talked about the history behind it, but they analyzed 2 CVEs, 2025, 4427 and 4428, which is interesting that they're 4-digit CVEs. Maybe they were pre-allocated, which I think it was 3Buddy Problem talked about how they were pre-allocating, and they're like, oh, they have so many vulnerabilities, they have to pre-allocate. But I think once you're a CNA, I don't know if you get it automatically or you have to request a certain number of reservations. I would think you'd get that automatically. When you're a CNA, you get a lot of the block so that when you have a vulnerability in your product, you don't have to go to MITRE to request a CVE. You already have them to be issued.
Which is why you have the disparity in resolution. They're so far apart in the number scheme.
Yes, exactly. That's why sometimes when you see a vulnerability, you're exactly rightly, when you see a vulnerability come out in 2025 and it has a 2024 based CVE, that's because whoever is disclosing that vulnerability in their product had a pre-allocated CVE. And so this is not uncommon. I don't think it's not specific to Ivanti. It's once you're a CNA, you have Microsoft, I think, was one of the first to have pre-allocated CVEs. And it is just because they want to be the authoritative source for issuing CVEs. That being said, Ivanti's Endpoint Manager Mobile, or EPMM, is an MDM solution and has this wonderful combination of authentication bypass plus authenticated remote code execution. Which, again, we get back to how do we evaluate risk when the first CVE is a 5.3, the second one's a 7.2, but I'm only paying attention to criticals. Well, these two put together is a critical. This is a 10.0 if you've got both of these vulnerabilities, which is interesting. Now, the other interesting thing about this one is they say it stems from a library. So this is like a supply chain vulnerability in that they used a library that had a vulnerability. But when you dig into all the details, and you can see excruciating details in the Watchtower Labs post, it's the way they use the library, not necessarily the library itself. There was like a message that they posted from one of the developers or documentation from the library that was like, don't use it in this way. And they used it in that way, basically. Oh, yeah. The constraint validator context documentation specifies that developers should be very careful when integrating user input into a custom message template, as it will be interpreted by the expression language engine, which may allow attackers to run arbitrary Java code. Well, guess what Ivanti did?
Yep. Yes. So yeah, this was the Mobile Iron MDM suite that they picked up.
Oh, so this was Mobile Iron.
Yeah.
Oh.
So that's where actually
interesting.
It was over a year ago we were seeing an upswing in Ivanti branded products having issues, and what it was is they had acquired a whole lot of companies and they were having trouble getting their arms around keeping the security up across all the products, whether they were still under the control of the original development teams or they had sucked it into something else. Notwithstanding, they were just
I get it, and I wrote that
they
in
were
my
getting
notes.
better.
They inherited code, which I can attest is nightmare to maintain.
Absolutely.
But I don't believe they've adopted best practices for secure software development.
Well, I was going to say something that what you were just saying about don't use this way and we use it this way tells me there was something missing. I mean, you could call it that may not be secure coding. That's just using the code wrong. But it still falls under the umbrella of secure coding practices. I
just want to say, before you go, Sam, I just want to say, if your developers have an IDE that has a linter in it that can look for bugs, it probably should have flagged this issue we just talked about. It probably should have said you're using this incorrectly and it could be a security vulnerability. And I know it's a blip on the radar from a developer, but that would be step one in my mind.
Well, I just think the big issue here is technical debt. Nobody wants to go back through the old stuff that hasn't changed in 10 years and try to fix it.
Right.
All the security measures only apply to the new stuff. And when you inherit a company, you inherit their technical debt. So this is a really thorny problem.
Yeah, but you got to have a development process and people implementing the process and advocating for this for sprints. This sprint, we're going to focus on this new feature because it's important to the business.
Mm-hmm.
But then this next sprint, there's not going to be a whole bunch of features to talk about. We got to go back and we got to fix the plumbing in the background. And that's
hard. It's
and
hard to
get
get
do
a
the
return
next
on
sprint, right? You got to do it by sprint. And I know it's hard because you got to take a time out. I've talked about this in the development process.
Yeah.
You got to take a time out and you got to focus resources. And
the question
clearly
is,
companies like Ivanti and others don't do that.
Yeah, but what's the ROI on fixing the legacy code? I can see why management resists this. You're going to spend so much time and money, and you're going to accomplish nothing as far as the customer can see.
So I'd justify it this way. If we do a sprint and we focus on the plumbing, just using general terminology, right? A sprint focused on plumbing allows us to implement features and fix bugs more quickly than it was before. So if you can deal with this hit now, moving forward, we'll make up for it because future sprints are going to fix more bugs and implement more features because we have a better framework in the back end. That's how I used to business justify it. When I had to, in our small company, I was developing PBWorks, our podcast software. That's how I would justify it because Matt was the CEO and he and I would get in the meeting and I'm like, I know you need all these features, but if I got to take this, I got to convert us from Python 2 to Python 3. Like I have to do that. But once I do that, then we won't have that debt anymore and I can focus on more features and maybe Python 3 gives us, better compatibility that allows us to move faster.
Yeah.
Did you have something, Mandy?
Oh, I was going to ask about, just the process. Like how often would they, if they're acquired and they have the technology debt, how often would they go back to open source libraries?
I would think never.
But that should be an ongoing. My answer to that, Manny, is a great question. Is to do this constantly ongoing in small pieces, like in pure DevOps fashion. Is in every release you're fixing and or updating, if not all your libraries, at least some of them. Maybe picking one. So you can mix your sprints now. Like, this sprint's focused on features, but a portion of this sprint is take our most critical vulnerability in a library that we have, that we know we use, that we know is vulnerable, and we're using the vulnerable functions, and we're going to go fix that, and that's going to be in this sprint. And you should constantly do that and be updating your dependencies and libraries as you go. I know Sam hates this idea because we talked about it on the show before, but
it could
it's hard.
be. Well, actually, this would be maybe a good use case for AI. AI would say, scan all this legacy code and find out what security vulns we've inherited. I don't know if they can do that yet, but when they can do that, that'll be a real valuable feature.
Yeah. So the Three Buddy Problem was talking about this because they were at the OpenAI Security Summit at RSA, where Dave Eitel, who works there now, who's been on the show before, works for OpenAI. And I don't have the talk. I haven't talked to. I got to catch up with Dave and figure out what he's working on. But Dave talked about using the resources that OpenAI has and creating a model and a process that discovers vulnerabilities, and that's truly amazing, right? And then the conversation went into how we use it. Do we use it for the benefit of mankind? How do we monetize it? Who monetizes it? I get that. But the technology in my mind exists today and will continue to get better to discover vulnerabilities. At the very least, use it to prioritize. So let's back up and say I don't have the resources OpenAI has, which not many do. But if I don't have those resources, I can certainly use it to help prioritize. I mean, even without LLMs, there's software that exists to look at your software to say, based on all my function calls, which library am I using the most? And what kind of, there's coverage. I mean, coverage is built into all kinds of language. Python, right? For example, has a coverage module. It tells you, the unit testing wise, did it cover this much stuff? And there's analysis software, like, tell me all the function calls that call this. So that's the most important, but the library that's called the most, let's make sure that one is updated first. So that can help you in your priority. So you're not working on this mountain of stuff, you're prioritizing.
Yeah.
There's ways to do this. I guess the point of my write-up here was there's ways to do this, and I don't think everyone's doing it this way. I'm glad we're refreshing everyone on the software development lifecycle. But, my thing was, you need a software composition analysis. You need something in the IDE. You need static analysis. You need dynamic analysis. You need pen testing. You need scanning. You need all those things. And it seems to me the folks that are producing these network and security appliances aren't always following all of these things that are what I would air quotes best practice for software development.
Obviously not.
Obviously not. Because the bugs we see are, I'm like, that someone should have caught that in the process. And not always. I mean, I think I've talked about this before, like Apple, I'm like, and Google, when there's a chain of vulnerabilities, I'm like, okay, like maybe they would have caught that, but highly unlikely that they would have. And it requires like a bug bounty or an independent researcher or malicious threat actor to uncover that and go, oh yeah, that's a problem. That I'm like, all right, giving you a pass. But a lot of these vulnerabilities in the network and security appliances are like stuff that we can spot in the process, is my point.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, Sam's agreeing with me.
Yeah.
Which isn't always the case.
Well, I'd like to just move into wild conspiracy theories. So China is putting an AI in space, and they're launching.
I thought you were on the solar thing. Yeah. All right. So let's talk about supercomputers in space. Yeah.
Yeah. They launched the first 10 satellites. They're going to put up 2,900 or 2,800 of them. They're going to have a fast laser link between the satellites. So they have a giant AI running in space. And they say they're doing this so they can use solar power and radiate their heat, reducing the energy needs and carbon footprint. And I got to say, that doesn't make a lick of sense. How does that make sense?
No. So at a high level, like, basic science that I learned in middle school is space is really cold.
Yes.
But it would be so much cheaper to do it down here.
It's closer to the sun
No.
than the Earth, right? And there's not the atmosphere that gets in the way. So if you wanted to solar power something in a place that's really cold, space is the place to do it. But I see
none
where
of that
you're
is
going.
None of that's ever going to pay for the expense of putting it up there.
The cost, yeah. I see what you're saying. The cost of putting supercomputers in space.
That can't be the real reason why they're doing this.
No, because there's another factor too, and that is, if it takes hand gesture detection, if it's 100 watts to run the computer on Earth, it's 100 watts to run the computer in space. So it's not going to save a whit of power.
No, you're right.
And on top of that, here we got to cool it to, let's say we want to cool it to 1 degree. Just pick a number. If I'm going to put it in space where it's absolute zero, I've got to heat it. So
potentially.
So
there's science that would go into that.
I know it's not as cut and dried in that, but so it's trade-offs. So that's where I'm going down the tinfoil.
The security benefit you get is physical security is great when it's in space.
Just one ICBM away. Yeah, that's it.
No, it's not. Actually, not at all. You can just shoot it with a rocket, and there's no way to update it or patch it. And no way to repair it.
Yeah. Well.
You can update it or patch it remotely, but
and if you want to physically repair it, you're going to have to.
This is true. It also complicates maintenance,
right? So, but then you get into the redundancy and also, oh, by the way, shielding, because meteorites and other things running around in space, including the space junk already orbiting our planet that deorbits.
Yep.
So much
Yep.
space junk. I think we covered that article, oddly enough, on the show years ago about how much space junk there was.
Oh,
So
yeah.
now I'm
there's a
thinking
lot,
about.
yeah.
You remember the movie Wall-E,
I
where
Yeah.
they zoom back from Earth and it's covered in crap, orbiting in outer space. But yeah, but I think it's really clever in terms of what could you do? I mean, what happens if you could run this thing at nearly absolute zero? I mean, isn't that one of the challenges with quantum, that if it
Mhm.
gets the colder it is, the more accurate it is?
Right.
Well, sure. But
But
this is not going to be quantum. That's why I
No,
assume
no,
it must. This thing has to have some kind of military purpose. I can't think of any other reason to put it in space
right.
at enormous cost. It's got to
Yeah.
be a surveillance network or something like that.
Well, I just
Well, it
went
is
back to my
China.
college class
So-
on designing computers and CPUs and all that stuff that was so fun and hands-on. That's where I was. But yes, I agree with
Yeah.
you, Sam, on what's the what do we say? The non-public application of this technology?
Or what's just the return on investment? I mean, you could clearly build a more powerful machine on Earth at 1/10 of the cost.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have, okay, it's a separate article I didn't upload, but researchers are developing world's first petahertz speed phototransistor in ambient conditions.
Ooh.
Yeah,
So,
so they've
peta
figured out.
speed, but at room temperature-ish.
Mhm.
Ooh.
Using, they can manipulate electrons in graphene using pulses of light that last less than a trillionth of a second. And then using quantum tunneling.
I was going
They
to say they're
recorded-
jumping into quantum space there.
Yeah.
Which is
Well, a
really
lot of
cool. But
A lot of
whoa.
electronics runs by quantum mechanics, but it's not a quantum processor.
No. I meant quantum mechanics, Sam. I just
Well,
Yeah,
thinking
technically,
about
don't
that.
we all have to go by quantum mechanics?
We do. Our biological process is also run by quantum mechanics. Yeah.
Are we going to have to institute a drink penalty for saying the word quantum?
Oh boy.
I was like, quantum? Oh,
Yeah.
man. Quantum Lee, Quantum Sam.
Remember the show
Quantum
Quantum Leap?
I love
Music for
Quantum Leap.
time.
That
it's a great
affected
show.
my life. That affected my life
Scott
tremendously.
Bakula.
I
great.
just
Way to
wish
go,
he hadn't
Mandy. That
become
was
a
a good-
douche.
Good segue there. But yeah, I mean, it is interesting. I'm just like, now that's the kind of cool stuff where, really increasing the performance of something.
That's
is-
1,000 times faster than modern computer chips.
I think there's a lot of, kind of bleeding edge science that hopefully becomes reality. Was Microsoft looking into like generating their own power?
Mm-hmm.
Basically, they're like Stark Industries, right? Like generating the constant renewable source of energy. Because I think it was a three-buddy problem that touched on this briefly too. That talked about how AI compute is one thing, but to power it is another thing. I think we have the same problem with electric vehicles. Obviously, where do we get the power from? Companies that have a monetary stake in the game, like Microsoft, are like, well, how do we get renewable energy? And they're putting stuff into that. It was Microsoft. Speaking of computers in space, it reminded me of the story of Microsoft putting, I don't know if it was supercomputers, but it was computing clusters that they put in the ocean.
Yeah.
Okay,
Right.
right. Keep them cool.
Mhm.
There's a slight
and keep them cool.
risk.
Yeah. I don't think that solves the power problem. It solves the cooling problem.
Solve the cooling problem at the potential expense of corrosion.
Right.
But
It worked.
still-
Whatever they did
Wonder
worked.
yeah.
I remember it being like a successful thing.
Yeah.
But I think back to Sam's point, it's cost. I want to deploy my data center and there's a cost. I want to deploy my data center in the ocean or in space. Astronomically increases cost, obviously.
Yeah.
I mean, liquid cooling is a thing. And I'm going to hold. I don't
Oh
know if
yeah,
this will
for
work,
sure.
But okay, this is what Livermore puts. It's a thing they put. What I want you to see the red and blue cables on that. That's a
Yeah.
supercomputer. That's for cooling. That's not power. Those are cooling lines.
Oh, interesting.
And so that's what I was like. Holy cow!
Like, submerge them in mineral oil. I was talking to Dad on my son's basketball team, Dad,
Mhm.
and I was like, "Oh, like you work in technology?" He's like, "Yeah, we sell server." He works in like the server rack data center infrastructure, not necessarily compute, but the other infrastructure.
Yeah.
And I was like, "Oh yeah." I'm like, "Have you seen the ones that are like totally submerged?" He's like, "Yeah, we saw that at a conference. It's super cool." He's like, "I think we deployed one for a customer." and the whole thing is submerged in. We've all seen them, right? Submerged in mineral oil.
So
It's amazing that
Yeah.
computers can operate.
check the size of those pipes. I mean, they're huge.
some big pipes,
Do you remember
Wow.
laying some
the
serious.
Cray 2? It
I
was
remember
entirely
Cray.
in
There's
fluid. The cooling system for the Cray was bigger than the physical Cray because it was liquid cooled.
it was liquid cooled.
Yeah, we had a number of Crays at the lab, and the Cray 2 we had was serial number 1. Don't buy serial number
Really?
1.
No,
And we
had
called it
problems,
bubbles
yeah.
because you could see the bubbles going up through the fluid.
Yeah, right.
But yeah, I mean, it was amazing. They had all these cooling units out in a whole different part of the data center, or even outside. But
Mhm.
it worked. It was really cool. No
I
pun
tell the
intended. I mean,
famous story.
It was fascinating.
I've probably
go
told
ahead,
it
move
5
on.
or 6 times on the show, but there was a Cray supercomputer at the university I worked at, and someone hacked into it, and the only reason they knew they were hacked is because the threat actor was applying patches, like basically patching the holes that they got in with so that no one else could get in, trying to preserve their access. And that's how they were discovered, because the administrator didn't notice any of the nefarious activity, but was like, wait,
Why it's a patch?
why are patches being applied? That's weird. I didn't apply those patches.
Yeah.
I did want to talk about the rogue communication devices found in Chinese solar power inverters. And this was a story that was circulating last week, like longer ago than my story number 6, which is from Reuters. Before the Reuters article, there was another article, and I believe it stemmed back from U.S. energy officials found that these solar infrastructure, so it's not, it's panels, inverters, all of the infrastructure that is required for solar power, the different components, had cellular modems that, I don't know if they found communications with the Chinese manufacturers or if they just found the presence of them. It's one of my critiques of this current story right now is the lack of details. So I'm like, all right, so you've got this solar gear. You found that it had cellular modems on it, but what was the analysis? Did someone do the analysis to say how was this tied into the actual functioning devices? How was it tied into those devices? Was it being used? What was it being used for? What kind of software or firmware was present? What evidence do you have that it could have been used for something malicious?
Yeah.
Versus it goes back to the patient monitor system.
Mhm.
In a lot of other air quotes backdoors that we've discovered that turn out to be, well, it's not. There was, you could call it a backdoor, but did it have malicious intent? Was it put there for the purpose of malicious usage? And the other thing is, did you observe malicious behavior in
Right.
these systems? And like none of those details are present in any of these articles. So the article summary is found undocumented communications devices. Now, I agree.
Were they mainly commercial panels?
I believe so. Yeah. But I also believe someone could purchase these. Is that true?
Okay.
And when I read the article, it was only a couple devices. The people will only talk about them anonymously. This just seems to me to be a story trying to inflame anti-Chinese sentiment based on
I
nothing.
agree.
Well,
Sam said what I was leading up to, that like I kind of call bunk on this story, to be quite honest.
Well,
And people getting all up in
yeah.
arms about it. I'm like, I think it's a positive thing that all of the analysis that was done on the patient monitor system, because now we have a heightened awareness when someone says we found evidence of tampering in our backdoors in our systems, and I'm like, okay, but you got to give me full details before I'm going to come on the show and say this is malicious. Sound the
Yeah.
alarm. We all need to go do forensics on anyone who has this gear, which
So-
maybe we
well,
do in this
So
case.
they're
but
saying, they're implying then that it's deployed so that China could take control of the grid when they want to in the future.
That's it.
they could disable the
And
the inverters are what convert the solar energy into electricity that we can use. Did I get that right? That's
Yeah.
what the inverter does.
And
okay.
so, and part of this is
that's-
risk based. You got to look at what can be done with these things. I mean, look with their track record. If I showed up with a Huawei inverter, you should send me packing. All right, but that doesn't mean somebody else isn't okay. And that when I was, I mean, and there's a lot of work done to analyze stuff before it's purchased. And in fact, I remember when we started getting into some solar arrays, there were features there that we just didn't allow to be enabled because we didn't like the risk, but you couldn't buy it without it.
That's
So-
what they said in the article, that the inverters are designed to allow remote updates, but the utilities block communications directly to China with firewalls. However, they're undocumented. Wasn't in the documentation. This gear contained cellular modems, cellular radios, they said,
Yeah.
that create additional undocumented communication channels that could bypass, obviously, if you're
Yeah,
blocking
now
on the
that's-
Wi-Fi or Ethernet side.
But
That's
somebody would
not
have
cool.
to pay for the cellular account. I mean, just having a cellular radio doesn't put you in contact with anybody, not until you subscribe to phone service.
You would have to subscribe to phone service here in the U.S. Yep.
And somehow
You're correct.
conceal that. And the thing that struck me immediately, because I've been teaching classes in this, is they already own our OT anyway, due to the vulnerabilities in the OT system. You don't need any of this exotic stuff.
You don't have to work that hard.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, it
I-
says
I-
this
I
was
don't
already
disagree
done in
with you.
November.
But yeah, I mean, I like DOE's responses that, they're basically, having to assess this stuff.
So it says that these hidden pathways could allow remote attackers to disable or alter inverters, potentially destabilizing power grids, damaging infrastructure, and causing widespread blackouts.
But all they really
okay,
have is that there
okay.
was some undocumented hardware in there.
On solar infrastructure,
Yeah.
not other power
So
infrastructure. From what I read,
yeah.
although I don't know, but did they say it was in? No, the
Well,
article
and they
title says
referenced that
solar
this was
power inverters.
already done in November, though. But they said they couldn't
but see-
figure out how many inverters were switched off or the extent of disruption.
But I just see this as like you manufacture stuff, you buy other components, you put them together, and there's some extra components in there that you don't bother putting in the documentation in some of the units because you just assembled it out of pieces you obtained. I don't even see anything nefarious here at all, really.
But it's highly suspicious that there are cellular radios in. But what I want to know is, back to, I think it was Lee, your point, like someone needs to pay for a
it's Sam's
subscription,
point.
pay for that, or Sam, right? Pay for that subscription.
Yeah.
Right.
Unless
Were-
there's some
were
sort
these
of
radios
SOS level
actually
of
in-
service they can use?
But were they actually in use? Were they actually
Yeah.
communicating
I doubt it.
with anything? Or is it like this happened with Nest thermostats? It wasn't a cellular radio, but it was Zigbee. When a researcher did the hardware analysis on some of the earlier Nest thermostats before they were bought by Google, I believe, that they discovered, like, hey, on the circuit board, like there's a chip. And so that's what you do in hardware reverse engineering, right? Take it all apart, you look at the PCB, you look at all the chips on it, and then you map, like, what does that chip do? What does that chip do? What does that chip do? And like people have a lot of experience can basically look at a picture and go, oh, that chip does that, that chip does that. That one I might have to research. The researcher found that there was a Zigbee radio in Nest thermostats. And according to all of Nest documentation that we could find, there was no mention of Zigbee communications in the Nest thermostat. It could be a similar situation here where they're there if they want to enable them, or you get a firmware update and it enables them, or the user has to subscribe and get service for it and register it and use it. Other than that, they're not used.
There's one more.
But we don't
scenario.
get that level of detail. We don't get the full forensic analysis to say, were these actually active? Were they in use? Were they registered with a carrier? Did you go back to the carrier and ask who registered that particular? Because that's like forensics 101 if you were to find one of these devices in your
So
environment.
There's one more scenario where they could be showing up, and that's with the system on a chip. They got a chip that walks, it talks, it makes Julian fries. It's got Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, Zigbee.
It's got a
et
cellular
cetera.
modem. Yep.
It's got a cellular modem in it. Even if you're only using, let's say we're only going to use the Wi-Fi on it, but it is, the most, it might be my standard chip for wireless communication in all the products I manufacture, regardless of which those features I use, then I'm saving on a standard. And I know what my code has to work with and everything. That doesn't make me nefarious. It means it's got more capability than I'm disclosing. And I don't even think if you had the hardware equivalent of an SBOM, that would address it. unless you listed the chip model and somebody
mean,
said, "Oh,
it's-
that's got Zigbee."
But
in
it's
it.
likely it could be truly stealthy
Yeah,
and
well, of
operate
course.
independently like a BMC chip inside of it. It could be
Right.
completely stealthy, but
Sure.
it's likely that the firmware on the functioning portion of these devices would have to have some knowledge of that communications device, like a cellular radio, in order to be effective, in order for it to be a backdoor that allows it to disrupt power or interface with the actual function of the device. The firmware would have to have something in there that enables the radio or has some artifacts about the radio. Yeah, it could be a completely different subsystem on the PCB that operates completely independent of the firmware that's powering the solar inverter functionality, for example. It operates similar to a BMC. But hardware reverse engineering and forensics would give us many of those answers.
Yeah. I mean, it'd be fun to discover something like this.
Hmm.
You know, hey, look, where'd that come from?
Actually do the study and pull the stuff apart and pull the
see if it's
firmware off the chips and see
what's
what links there are to what.
You know, and have the detectors to see if there's anything, you know, any transmissions happening or whatever.
Right. But it's also hard to, like, let's say you've got a solar farm,
Mhm.
got a bunch of these inverters, and you're monitoring for cellular communications.
Mhm.
It's hard to separate those communications channels.
Yes, I
right?
agree.
Like, there's cellular traffic. Oh, of course, there's cellular traffic in the area. 'Cause people have cell phones.
Yeah. How do you determine that legitimate cell phone traffic from something coming out of your solar panel? Unless
You
you're
take the
sitting in a
device
lab?
inside of a skiff and you have everyone put and then you see
Or a
if there's
Faraday cage,
communications.
yeah.
Or a Faraday cage or something, right? Yeah.
Yeah, but it's still, I still think it'd be interesting to research. I don't know how practical it'd be to research, but I think it'd be kind of fun to find something like that. But then what? I don't know. But that's the thrill of the hunt, right?
Yeah, I think it's highly unlikely, in my opinion, that there's a cellular radio on these devices that you would find no artifacts in the firmware that operates the intended functionality of the device.
Yeah, I agree.
Right? It would be something in a
Yeah.
library, something, and they probably run Linux, embedded Linux. I don't know I didn't look into. Now I want to kind of look into what models these are.
Mm-hmm.
And see. But
Oh.
yeah, I'm not impressed yet. I need more information before I'm impressed.
Well, no, I in terms of an active threat, I'm with you on that. But like I said, it'd be fun to find more about what they're doing. And because the other question is, what were they planning on? You know, if it was there for a future kind of something they had in mind that didn't pan out yet, or how did it get there? That I don't think
It
we'll
could
ever get the answer to that, but that would be an interesting question.
Like it could be a completely legitimate thing.
Yeah,
And it could be
that's what I'm
completely like, I'm not saying it's not. It's malicious. Like, it could be malicious as well.
Right.
But like, let's just go down the path of what if it's completely legitimate? I make this hardware and software in the solar things, and I put a cellular radio in it. In the event that your solar powered farm does not have any internet connectivity, you're way out in the middle of nowhere, but you still want to be able to remotely access the gear to do maintenance, monitoring, and firmware
Exactly.
updates. And therefore, hey, there's a cellular radio
We
in
can
there.
fail
but
over the cellular radio.
We're not enabling that right now. It's not a feature we want to enable. We're going to roll it out later, similar to the
Mhm.
Nest having Zigbee. It might be something we might use later. Let's just put it on the PCBs now, and we might use it later. We might not.
And because it's
How dare
subscription
you be
based, you may not
reasonable?
enable it. Sorry,
And
Mandy, go
right,
ahead.
it's a totally
Sorry.
reasonable explanation
How
in my
dare
mind.
you?
Mandy, right? But that reasonable explanation doesn't get clicks to media sources and create buzz.
No, it doesn't.
True.
Nor do my ad trackers find that Pacific, and damn it.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Oh, do we want to go back to Ivanti? I had more
Nah,
Ivanti,
we-
believe it or not.
well, okay. I mean,
Well, I
we
do
kind of
wanna-
run them through the ringer.
I know. Poor
There were a
Ivanti.
couple of Lee's stories that I want to touch on if he has.
Sure.
The
Go through it.
Firefox, the Ponza own 100K awards. I don't know if you want to talk about that.
So there were two
I
vulnerabilities
thought
in
Firefox.
Firefox.
I thought Firefox was written in Rust. That's what I thought when I saw this story.
Ooh. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, but
I thought Mozilla
Huh.
is the one. I heard something on a podcast that Mozilla was the one that catapulted Rust,
Well,
like
it's-
helped took over Rust. Is that?
but it's in
That
the
does
flaws are in
seem
the
familiar,
JavaScript
but-
engine, which could be written in Rust, but it's still
Well, what were the vulnerabilities?
Yeah. Go ahead. Lee.
resolving promise object and out of down optimizing linear sums.
Well, if that's not a contradiction.
Yeah, okay.
No. So as of May 2025, Rust makes up a significant but still minority portion of the Mozilla Firefox code base. I get what they're saying though. I get what they're saying.
We're module by module going to rewrite it in Rust and just
It depends on your perspective. Like
yeah.
zero amount of Rust code versus a couple 100,000 lines is significant. But if the Firefox code base is 2 million lines, it's a minority of the Firefox code base.
Right.
Oh, so here it is. Oh, wait. So this is, the nerd in me finds this interesting. Rust accounts for approximately 3.6 million lines of code in the Firefox repository out of a total of 43.9 million lines. And this is
Okay.
coming from an LLM. This is Perplexity. So if you work for Mozilla and you're like, that's grossly inaccurate, please let us know.
Yeah.
But that's what they say.
It's
Hmm.
I mean, it's cool that they're moving up like that. I think that's
Mm.
really neat. And so therefore, but then you could still wind up with some traditional issues like that are due to being not in Rust. But I mean, they did release the fixed version on the 17th, which was basically they were on it before the Pwn to Own event. As I recall, it was actually disclosed before that. But the,
Well, was it a use after free? Did you say? What did you say it was?
one was an
It's
out of
called an
bounds
out of
access.
bounds access, whatever that
Okay.
is.
Sure.
Which I'm not sure if that's something Rust would mitigate or not.
Yeah, I
Mm.
mean,
Yep.
you're reaching to beyond the defined memory limits. I don't.
I would
think
think
My answer
Rust
would
would
be,
block
it
that,
depends.
but I haven't tried it. I know Rust blocks use after free.
Yeah.
But out of bounds access, I'm not sure.
Yeah. Jumping to the crazy pointer location,
Right.
but yeah,
Yeah, it says Rust prevents out-of-bounds memory access in safe Rust code. Core part of its memory safety guarantees.
Yeah, that's what I would
in other
expect.
words, if you
So this
create
must-
crappy code, it's not going to help you.
well, you
Well,
have
the
to
flaws are
mark it
probably-
unsafe.
The flaws are
Okay.
probably in the and C++ accounts for 7.8 million lines of code, and C code in Firefox is 3.7 million lines of code.
So what's the rest?
Again, this is according to an LLM. So
So none of those are the majority. What's the majority of the code written? in?
the majority, so 24% of the code base is C++ in Firefox.
Oh, okay. All right.
22% close second, 7.1 million lines of JavaScript.
Okay. Well, it's the C++.
Good Lord, I can't imagine maintaining 7.1 million lines of JavaScript. I want to cry inside and outside, both at the same time.
Yeah, me
I'm
too.
just trying to wrap
JavaScript-
my brains around that. It's like
JavaScript is a really hostile language.
It has 1.5 million lines of Python. I'd rather deal with that all day
yeah.
long rather than even 1.5 million lines of JavaScript.
Yeah, absolutely. JavaScript is mind-bending. It's like you're on drugs. The thing that got me is the lines of code do not execute in order. It took me like 2 days to actually believe that.
Mm-hmm. So, sorry, Lee, this was the Pwn to Own.
Yeah, no, it's cool.
There was a lot of cool stuff that came out of Pwn to Own.
Those events are always neat. The stuff they find and
Yeah.
the bounties or whatever you want to call it, people get for them. I think that's highly cool. I mean, this comes back to the state of vulnerability disclosure and discovery that we are at now, where it was, we've gone from keep your mitts off my damn code, it's none of your business where the flaws is, to like, come help me find flaws and I'll pay you if you find something that's cool. I think that's where we need to be across the board. And I know it's going to step on some egos, but I think overall the right direction, because there's always going to be flaws in your coding process, because we got these human beings do a lot of stuff, and it's cool. And I think even with
what they
the
say is
LLMs in there, it's still, there's a risk. So why not? Let's get everybody to help us find our stuff before somebody we don't like finds it.
But it's interesting in the article, Lee, it says both flaws are demonstrated.
Yep.
They were awarded 50,000 each, which means there will definitely be copycat attacks trying to catch you before you've deployed the update.
Right.
Which means this is like a 1 day, right?
Yeah. So
Or,
this is like
it's a 1 day. So like the patch has been released. Maybe not everyone has patched it, but given that Firefox is open source software and the CVE description says it's an out of bound reads on a JavaScript promise object, all of the groundwork is there for someone to go reverse engineer and do a patch diff and go, okay, there's the vulnerability, and now how do I develop an exploit?
I'm sure there's a proof of concept out there by now.
Exactly. They haven't released it, but you can. This is one of the dangers of open source software, because we have the source, and not just the source. We have a record of all of the source, so we can see the exact commits that fix the bug, which help us pinpoint where the vulnerability is, and then extrapolate and exploit. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. That's just the nature of the beast. It really underscores you have to keep Firefox up to date. Basically.
When I was reading this one, the first thing I did almost unconsciously is go about Firefox, and discovered I had the patched version installed. But and actually, I do that same thing when I'm reading about a Chromium or Chrome flaw. It's like, if I got it, then I'll invariably find some browser buried under 7 other windows that has a relaunched update prompt on it.
This is why I love the rolling Linux distributions. Is they're just constantly pushing down new software. No, that's a double-edged sword. I'll agree with you there. Certainly a double-edged sword. It creates work when you were not expecting to do that type of work, and you have to come to peace with that. That I know just sometimes that I build it in my day, and you don't know when it's coming. Maybe I start my days a little earlier or build it into my process. But the benefit is constantly applying the patches,
right?
When there's a race like this,
and with something like your browser, it used to be a really horrible deal to restart your browser. I mean, it's not zero, and there's somebody out there who's going to be who's yelling at me saying, "No, it really sucks when I do this," but it ain't like it used to be. And most times, I can restart the browser and start off, that close to where I was a minute ago.
And while we can live patch the kernel, you still have to reboot. I mean, most Linux, even though we have the technology, there was something I read about enhanced live patching in certain distributions, or some new form of someone developed, I believe, some new form of live patching, but a lot of that is more for server environments. I don't know if it was Google that developed it's not just they can patch the kernel, they can switch kernel versions on the fly without fully rebooting the system.
Ooh,
it still needs to be rebooted because you're swapping kernels out, but they can swap the kernel out without fully rebooting the system. But I also feel like I'm not talking about this like this is some new concept or technique, because I totally feel like going back to mainframe days, we had capability like this to do that kind of thing. So like computer science wise, the computer science wise, this is nothing new. I think what's new is you can do this with modern Linux distributions and kernels, which is kind of neat. But still, these are edge cases for most of us. When I apply a kernel update, I still reboot, even though it tells me I don't have to reboot. I still reboot because I run into weird driver thing. This is my one weird driver thing. So if you're in this predicament, pay attention, because this is what I've learned, and I don't understand exactly why, but when I apply a kernel update, new USB devices that are plugged into the system are not recognized at all. Like silence, like nothing happens, and you can pull your hair out all day long searching the internet and running it through LLMs, and it's going to give you all these ridiculous things to try, and your device is still not going to show up, and you're going to make no progress whatsoever. Ask me how I know this. But if you reboot, magically everything works great. And so I'm like, all right, every time the kernel updates, I gotta reboot. Otherwise, I'm going to forget. I'm going to plug in a USB device, especially like a ESP32 or similar device where it wants the serial TTY. And I'm like, maybe I'm just not hitting the buttons right to put it in bootloader mode to get the serial TTY to update the firmware. And I'm blaming that process. But really, I just needed to reboot my Linux system. So.
Well, I was going to say what I've noticed is on some of the servers I patched that the patching mechanism does a much better job of restarting service or something short of the kernel,
Right.
so that you're running as much of the new stuff as possible. I mean, yeah, I know when I need to I got to reboot
Your
the kernel.
bootloader too. I notice
Yeah.
a lot of Linux distributions are updating Grub. They're finally implementing the patches for the vulnerabilities that were disclosed in February. And Linux distributions treat this differently. At least I know in Manjaro, and likely Arch-based distributions or Arch itself in general, it'll update Grub, but it won't install it on your EFI partition. It leaves that to you. And Manjaro has actually implemented a script that you can install from the repository, which will do that for you. Which, full disclosure, I use the script because I'm like, if someone did the script, I'm going to test that on one of my other systems, make sure it works, and that's what I'm going to use because that saves me some work, and I'm lazy. They also have documentation on how to do it manually. I'm like, oh, yeah, I've done that before way back in the day, but I'd prefer to have a script that does it for me as long as it's reliable, which it has been, at least for me. But I noticed Ubuntu swapped out my bootloader for me.
Nice.
Which Ubuntu wants to be the easier to use Linux distribution. But the word of caution is the same thing. We were talking about Firefox, right? Like the update is not applied until you've really verified it. It's almost like a backup. It's not really a backup unless you can actually do a restore. A patch is not a patch until you've actually verified that it's been installed. And that may mean you have to restart a process. You have to do another step like Grub, or you have to reboot to do that. And oftentimes that's left to the user. So what I did was I SHA-256 hashed my bootloaders on the EFI partition. I installed a new Grub, and then I hashed them again, and I got different hashes. And I'm like, well, that's one test, right? Like, it's not the greatest test, but at least I know something changed. I got new files on my EFI partition, and then I rebooted, and everything was fine. But still, there's other verification that I would want to do, especially if you're running secure boot, right? To make sure that you did get a non-vulnerable bootloader on your operating system. So same thing with browsers. You got to restart for the update to apply to your point, Lee. That's easier than bootloaders and kernels, but
yeah. I'm going to have to bail pretty soon, but one question for you. I've been debating on, with getting more firmware updates now on my Linux boxes, particularly, like bootloader stuff. Is reboot enough, or should I be power cycling?
A reboot's enough.
Okay.
Yeah,
Because there's part of me that thinks, I ought to power cycle just to make sure, but yeah.
In most cases,
but I'm old. Remember?
Yeah, I have to think of a scenario where you need to power up. Usually, reboots are enough,
right?
To redo that. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if my Raspberry Pi is at all unstable, powering it off and on again helps. But that's a Raspberry Pi. That's a different use case. They're very cool, but they're a different use case.
I did find, I believe it was on my Raspberry Pi. It's funny you mentioned that. So my one remaining Raspberry Pi that I use as just like a utility system here in the studio, I've replaced a lot of them with actual x86 hardware just because reasons, right? Like support for various monitoring software and whatnot. But my Ubuntu Raspberry Pi, it held back the Grub update, whereas my x86 systems went through. I believe that's what I experienced. I believe that was today. I did updates. Yeah, that was today. I did some updates, and I was like, well, that's weird. Like I saw the Grub update start to come in Ubuntu, and it puts it in it says this update has been delayed due to phasing, which means like you've seen that before, right? And every time I see that, I don't know if you watch the Archer cartoon series. Every time I see that, I read it as phrasing. So, and I don't know if you know Archer, right? But instead of saying that's what she said, he says phrasing. And so when I see my Ubuntu updates, I'm like, this update has been held back due to phrasing. I'm like, what? Oh, no, phasing. Phasing is why they held it back. So on my Raspberry Pi, it was held back phasing. But on my x86, it actually applied it. And then on Manjaro, I had to do the package is called install-grub. So I haven't installed that. that worked well for me. I'm just like swapping out your bootloader is don't take that lightly. I'm not saying you take it lightly. That's a serious operation, right? It goes back to like one of my most popular social media posts, the difference between Windows and Linux. In Windows, you ask it, hey, can I uninstall Microsoft Edge? And Windows like, no, I can't let you do that. And then you ask Linux, you're like, hey, I want to delete my bootloader. And it's like, yeah, go for it. Have at it. Right? So it's like not, don't take it lightly. Back some stuff up. Have contingency plans when you do this kind of stuff. All righty. That was you have to drop, Lee. I still have one. We've got a couple minutes left. There's still a couple of things I wanted to hit. A Honeywell. I don't know what I didn't look up what this device was because I focused on a different aspect of this. A Honeywell MB Secure Authenticated Command Injection. This is a Honeywell MB Secure. I don't know what that is. What is a Honeywell MB Secure? Oh, it's an alarm control panel. Okay. And the alarm control panel runs Linux, I believe. It looks that way. And it has a Lua web interface. And there is an authenticated command injection, multiple. Nope, same one, same CVE. There's a authenticated command injection in the ping command. So in a lot of these IoT-based systems, you log into the web management interface. In one of the pieces, or a feature, I should say, in the web management interface, allows you to run the ping command to test functionality because they don't want people logging in on the command line. But there may be a situation that arises where you want to ping stuff from the device. So why not put that in the web user interface? Sam's laughing already because he knows where I'm going with this, because the history of these vulnerabilities is enormous and vast. How many IoT systems have we seen that have a web management interface that allow you to run the ping command that have been vulnerable to command injection? There's like, I didn't do the study, but someone can do the study. If I have time, I'll do the
classic
study.
one.
It's classic, right? Okay,
this is the textbook demonstration. I've got this in my projects. This is like Security 101, lesson 1.
And even if they try and lock it down, there's so many ways to do command injection once you're at this point that they just can't lock it down.
Oh, sure you can. You just don't let them put in you take an IP address and you don't let them put in anything except 4 numbers,
True, but you can escape. There's escape characters. There's all kinds of shenanigans we can play. There's chaining commands together. The filtering always seems to break down in this particular functionality. Why do we have this? Why do we need this functionality? And if you do need this functionality, why are you ducking out to an operating system command?
Yeah.
So if I had more time this week, I would have gone to an LLM and I would have asked it in like Lua, or there's a lot of different ways you could build your own ping command that only lets you send ICMP packets of a certain type and receive ICMP packets of a certain type. You could build that into a lot. Now, it may have vulnerabilities, but you're not going out to the command line. Like, just build this into whatever library or language, right? Like in Python or even Lua. I bet you could go construct me a library that generates packets that allow people to do testing via ICMP.
Yeah, it's been known for like 30 years. You don't use eval or OS system, or you're just asking for this.
Right. Yeah, I didn't analyze the Lua code to see exactly where the command injection was. Oh, it was as simple as it looks like putting a semicolon and then a command.
Yeah.
Like, really?
And so, there's so many ways to avoid this. Yeah. It says, this is just ridiculous. This is like the warning that came out last week where I think it was CISA said, how about you guys quit having buffer overflows? Why don't you stop having stack buffer overflows? Just vulnerabilities never go away. You just get a new generation of coders that make the same dumb mistake,
Like cross-site scripting, which is the other story that I wanted to cover quick. It was Russian threat actors did a phishing campaign where in the email they were exploiting cross-site scripting vulnerabilities in popular mail servers. Let's see. There's a lot of fluff in this report, but there's the specific email infrastructure software. Oh, here it is. Horde, MDaemon, and Zimbra. I used to run Zimbra back in the day. It was a nightmare. And security-wise, it's been a nightmare since then. It was 2007 I was running it. But the cross-site scripting got the attacker. It's kind of impressive what the attackers were able to do with cross-site scripting. And that is steal webmail credentials, sometimes by forcing logouts and displaying fake login forms, exfiltrate contacts and email messages, steal two-factor authentication secrets, and create app passwords to bypass 2FA. Some payloads set up email forwarding rules for persistence, which is that's a classic attack. All of this because cross-site scripting vulnerabilities. So if you're glossing over cross-site scripting vulnerabilities because you're just like, I don't care about cross-site scripting vulnerabilities, you don't do that. You gotta patch those too. Just because it says cross-site scripting. And look, I understand the cross-site scripting got the bad rap, right? Like there could be innocuous cross-site scripting vulnerabilities, or there could be really bad ones and everything in between, and you never know. And here's a case where it was a bad day for some people. So,
yeah.
Ivanti also had another product that they're end of lifing in 2026. They had a lot. It was their DSM product. Is a Windows-based solution for centralized software distribution and management, which I thought they're probably replacing this with Endpoint Protection Endpoint Manager. Endpoint Manager is Ivanti's product for this, which is probably why they're sunsetting this product. But it has a history of vulnerabilities as well as a bunch of new ones in all kinds of attack surface. So if you're using Ivanti DSM, you want to get off of that. It's basically my story number 7. So with that, thank you everyone, Sam, Mandy, Lee, and thanks everyone for listening and watching this edition of Paul Security Weekly. Over.